In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a rocket tears itself apart in the sky. It is the third time in a row. 3 launches, 3 failures, millions of dollars vaporized in seconds. On the deck of a small barge, Elon Musk watches the smoke fade. Engineers are silent, investors are panicking, journalists are already writing the obituary. SpaceX is dead. Elon has one more chance, one more rocket, one last pool of money. Roughly $300 million left before everything collapses. Most people would stop. Most people would protect what remains, retreat, save their reputation. Elon does the opposite. He decides to bet everything on one final launch. This is not just a business decision. This is a window into his psychology. Elon Musk grew up in South Africa as a quiet, introverted kid. He spent hours reading science fiction, physics books, and encyclopedias instead of playing with other children. He was bullied so badly, he once ended up in the hospital. That kind of childhood usually creates one of 2 paths. Some people shrink and try to live a safe life. Others escape into their minds and build alternative worlds where they have control. Elon chose the second path. He developed a rich internal world made of rockets, planets, and future civilizations. His sense of what was normal was already very different. While most kids dream of a good job, he was thinking about colonizing Mars. That early mental world matters because it sets the reference point for the rest of his life. For Elon, big and crazy ideas feel natural, not insane. As a young adult, he moved to North America, studied physics and economics, and jumped straight into startups. Zip2, PayPal. Each time, he took almost all the money he made and put it into the next idea. When eBay bought PayPal, Elon could have retired comfortably for the rest of his life. Instead, he poured most of his fortune into 2 companies that looked suicidal at the time, Tesla and SpaceX. Psychologists would call this an extremely high tolerance for risk, but it is more specific than that. He does not gamble blindly. He runs his brain on something close to expected value thinking. Instead of asking, "What if I lose?" he asks, "What is the payoff if this works?" multiplied by the chance that it works. If the upside is massive enough, he is willing to endure. Terrifying downside. When he founded SpaceX in 2002, the space industry was dominated by government agencies and giant defense contractors. Everyone told him it was impossible. Rockets were too complex, too dangerous, too expensive. But Elon saw a different picture. He believed rockets could be built cheaper if you vertically integrated, manufactured your own engines, and reused hardware. This was not just engineering optimism. It came from a mental habit he often talks about, reasoning from first principles. Instead of accepting industry assumptions, he breaks problems down to the basic physics and raw material costs, then rebuilds his own answer. First principles thinking is a psychological defense against social pressure. When everyone around you says, "This cannot be done," first principles tell you, "Let's check the numbers ourselves." The first SpaceX rocket, Falcon 1, was supposed to prove that his method worked. The first launch failed. The rocket shut down prematurely and fell into the ocean. The second launch also failed. A fuel leak caused a fire. The third failure, in 2008, was the most brutal. The rocket took off, but a staging problem caused it to lose control and explode. 3 failures in a row are not just technical events. They are psychological earthquakes. They trigger shame, self-doubt, and fear of judgment. Most founders would interpret 3 failures as proof that the universe is telling them to stop. Elon interpreted them as data. This is one of the core traits of his psychology. He separates his identity from the result. The rocket failed. The idea might still be right. The design needs fixing. He does not translate "this attempt failed" into "I am a failure." This mental move is related to what psychologists call growth mindset and cognitive reframing. A fixed mindset treats failure as a verdict on your ability. A growth mindset treats failure as information about your strategy. Cognitive reframing goes one step further. It takes a negative event and deliberately changes its meaning. Instead of 3 rockets exploded, we are doomed, the reframed story becomes 3 rockets exploded. Now we know 3 ways that do not work. That might sound like a cliché motivational quote, But in Elon's case, it is a live operating system. When engineers wanted to give up, he reframed failure as tuition, expensive, but still a form of learning. There's another layer to his psychology, his time horizon. Most people are subconsciously anchored to short-term outcomes. Quarterly results. This year's salary. What friends and family will say next week. Elon's time horizon stretches decades into the future. He is not optimizing for comfort this year. He is optimizing for a vision of humanity as a multi-planetary species. That long time horizon changes your relationship with pain. If your goal is to avoid feeling bad this month, a third rocket explosion is unbearable. If your goal is to make humanity multi-planetary by 2100, three failed rockets are just early steps on a 100-year road. The pain is still real, but it becomes tolerable because it serves a story bigger than you. In 2008, after the third failure, the financial situation was catastrophic. The global financial crisis was in full swing. Tesla was close to bankruptcy. SpaceX was nearly out of money. Elon had roughly $300 million left that he could realistically count on. He could have saved himself by shutting down one company, preserving cash, and living a comfortable life. Instead, he decided to fund both Tesla and one more SpaceX launch. This decision looks insane from a conventional risk-averse mindset, but from his internal logic, it was rational. He applied asymmetric risk thinking. If the fourth rocket failed, he would be broke, but humanity would be no worse off than before. If it succeeded, it could unlock contracts with NASA, prove reusability was possible, and move humanity closer to spacefaring status. The downside was, I lose my fortune. The upside was, I help change the trajectory of our species. For a person whose identity is built around that mission, the upside dominates. There's also an ego component, but not the one people usually assume. Many think Elon is driven by vanity. Certainly he has a strong ego, but notice how often he chooses humiliation over safety. Being publicly wrong on a giant stage is every ego's nightmare. Yet he repeatedly walks into situations where failure would make him look ridiculous. Self-landing rockets, fully electric cars when the industry laughs at them, buying a social media platform in front of the entire world. This suggests his ego is tied less to appearing perfect and more to staying aligned with his self-image as a problem solver. As long as he is the person trying to solve the hardest problems, he can tolerate embarrassment. That is a very unusual configuration of pride. The fourth Falcon 1 launch in September 2008 finally worked. The rocket reached orbit successfully. Within months, NASA awarded SpaceX a multi-hundred-million-dollar contract to supply the International Space Station. That contract did not just save SpaceX financially. It validated Elon's entire mental model. His willingness to bet everything on one last shot had looked reckless. After success, it looked visionary. But here's the psychological trap most people fall into when they hear this story. They focus on the outcome and ignore the mindset. They think, if I knew the fourth launch would work, I would have bet everything too. But he did not know. The uncertainty was real. What allowed him to act was not secret knowledge. It was a different relationship with fear, failure, and long-term payoff. So what can an ordinary person learn from this psychology without needing to launch rockets? First, separate your identity from your experiments. When a project fails, avoid the sentence, I failed. Replace it with, this version failed because X. That small linguistic shift keeps your sense of self intact while you adjust strategy. Second, lengthen your time horizon. Ask yourself how this decision looks not this week, but in 5 or 10 years. Decisions that seem terrifying in the short term, starting a business, changing careers, investing in skills, often look obvious when viewed over decades. Third, think in asymmetric bets. Look for situations where the downside is limited, but the upside is huge. Learning a rare skill, launching a small side project, moving to a place with more opportunity. You do not need to risk everything like Elon did, but you can borrow the principle on a smaller scale. Finally, anchor your actions to a mission that feels bigger than comfort. Elon can stomach extreme stress because he believes he is working on existential problems. Sustainable energy and multi-planetary life. You do not need a space-level mission, But you do need a reason that feels larger than make money or look successful. When your work serves something you deeply care about, the brain reinterprets pain as meaningful struggle instead of pointless suffering. That psychological reframe is the hidden fuel behind many extreme achievements. Elon Musk's decision to bet $300 million after 3 rockets exploded was not a moment of madness. It was the logical outcome of a lifetime of unusual mental habits. First principles thinking, separation of identity from failure, long-time horizons, asymmetric risk calculations, and a mission that outruns personal comfort. Whether you admire him or hate him, understanding this psychology is more useful than simply calling him crazy or lucky. Because pieces of that mindset, applied carefully at your own scale, can radically change the way you handle fear, risk, and opportunity.